Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashto Tadashata Shri Śrimad. His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashto Tadashata Shri Śrimad. His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Prabhupada ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki. Prem Se Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Sham Kund Radhakund Giri Govardhan ki. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki. Navadvip Dham ki. Mayapur Dham ki. Jagannath Purushottam Shecha Puri Dham ki. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. All glories to some of the devotees. All glories to some of the devotees. All glories to some of the devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Okay. So, Hare Krishna everyone. Welcome to this morning's Śrimad Bhāgavatam class. Welcome y bienvenidos. Nice to see you again. Today we're going to be reading from the third canto, continuing our readings in chapter 33, entitled Activities of Kapila. And we'll be reading texts 23 to 26. So what I'll do is, I'll recite the prayers before I start reading everything. And since we're reading, two of the verses are grouped together, so since we're reading technically three combined things, I'll read the first two verses, and then the third we can all repeat, and then I'll read the purport. And it's a quite extensive purport by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, so you won't have to hear me speak so much. But I'll comment as we go, as I'm reading the purport. It'll just be a better way to flow through the class. So, Hare Krishna. Pray for the blessings of all the devotees here, especially Amogalila Prabhu, Anantacharya Prabhu in the back, all the senior Vaishnavas, please, and all the present devotees. I don't have many qualifications, but somehow I'm here getting the opportunity to serve the Śrimad Bhāgavatam and the devotees present. So getting the opportunity to serve both the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat is quite a blessing by the spiritual master. So although I'm very unqualified, I pray that you can be merciful upon me and make me qualified to say something that's encouraging for us in our devotional life. Okay? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Nashta Prayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Shrinvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana Hridantasto Yabhadrani Virunoti Suhitshatam Om Agyanativirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Shri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanshakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yashadeve Parabhaktir Yatadeve Tithagaro, Tasyaite Katita Hirta Prakashante Mahatmana. Okay, so as I said, I'll just read the first two verses here, and then we'll repeat them on the third. So, text 23. Dhyayati Bhagavad Rupam Yadaha Dhyanagocharam Sutta Prasanna Vadanam Samasta Vyasta Chintaya. Translation. Thereafter, having heard with great eagerness and in all detail from her son Kapiladev, the eternally smiling personality of Godhead Devahuti began to the eternally smiling personality of Godhead Devahuti began to meditate constantly upon the Vishnu form of the Supreme Lord. Text 24 and 25. Bhakti pravaha yogena vairagyena baliyasa yuktanushtana jatena jnanina brahmahetuna vishnudhena tadatmanam atmana vishvato mukham Swanubhutya tirubhuta maya guna visheshanam. Translation. She did so with serious engagement in devotional service. Because she was strong in renunciation, she accepted only the necessities of the body, and she became situated in knowledge due to realization of the absolute truth. Her heart became purified. She became fully absorbed in meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all misgivings due to the modes of material nature disappeared. Okay, so next text you can repeat after me. Brahmanyavashtita matir Bhagavatyatma samshaye Nivrita jivapati tvat Kshina kleshapta nivriti Brahmanyavashtita matir Bhagavatyatma samshaye Nivrita jivapati tvat Kshina kleshapta nivriti Brahmanyavashtita matir Bhagavatyatma samshaye Nivritta jiva patitvat Kshinga kleshapta nivritte. Brahmanyavashtita matir Bhagavatyatma samshaye Brahmanyavashtita matir Bhagavatyatma samshaye Nivritta jiva patitvat Kshina kleshapta nivritti. Brahmanyavashtita matir Bhagavatyatma samshaye Nivritta jiva patitvat nivritti. Brahmanyavashtita matir Bhagavatyatma samshaye Nivritta jiva patitvat Kshina kleshapta nivritti. Kshina kleshapta nivritti. Brahmani, in Brahman, avashtita, situated, matihi, her mind, Bhagavati, in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Atma Sangshaye, residing in all living entities, Nirvrita, freed, Jiva, of the Jiva soul, Apatitvat, from the unfortunate condition, Kshina, disappeared, Klesha, material pangs, Apta, attained, Nivritti, transcendental bliss. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Her mind became completely engaged in the Supreme Lord, and she automatically realized the knowledge of the impersonal Brahman. As a Brahman-realized soul, she was freed from the designations of the materialistic concept of life. Thus, all material pangs disappeared, and she attained transcendental bliss. So before we start this purport here, the basis is we're understanding Devahuti's practice once Lord Kapila Deva is taking leave from her, and then also what she's achieving So this last verse here describes what she's achieving by following these processes that Lord Kapila gave to her in chapter 28 and also in chapter 29. But here more specifically, we're hearing the instructions that she's following from Kapila from chapter 28 about meditating on the form of the Lord. So, purport. The previous verse states that Devahuti was already conversant with the absolute truth. It may be questioned why she was meditating. The explanation is that when one theoretically discusses the absolute truth, he becomes situated in the impersonal concept of the absolute truth. Similarly, when one seriously discusses the subject matter of the form, qualities, pastimes, and entourage of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes situated in meditation on him. If one has complete knowledge of the Supreme Lord, then knowledge of the impersonal Brahman is automatically realized. The absolute truth is realized by the knower according to three different angles of vision, namely Brahman, localized supersoul, and ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, if one is situated in knowledge of the Supreme Person, this implies that one is already situated in the concept of the supersoul and impersonal Brahman. So here Prabhupada's first talking about Devahuti meditating. So sometimes this process of dharana. In chapter 28, Lord Kapila first describes these processes of Ashtanga Yoga. And so one of these processes, I believe the 7th stage of Ashtanga Yoga is dharana. And it's also actually the 3rd stage in one of the 3rd processes of devotional service, which is called smaranam. So Prabhupada's saying here, why is it that she's meditating? Because she was already conversant with the absolute truth. And he actually explains that when one is meditating on the absolute form, he'll explain also here in this next paragraph that this is a process of devotional service. So Brahmabhuta Prasanatma, as Prabhupada will say in this next paragraph, one is already becoming freed from these material entanglements. So there's no need for, there's no questioning of her entering into meditation. And I thought to take advantage of this, what Prabhupada's saying here, because it's a very important point. In chapter 28, Lord Kapila, after describing the processes of Ashtanga Yoga and Pranayama and all these things, he then actually talks about meditating on the form of the Lord. And so he gives examples of meditating on qualities of Krishna or of Vishnu in that scenario. And then he actually gives an entire process by which one first can look at the deity. So when you're here and you're present, it's not just like you have to just kind of stare with googly eyes. We can actually be attentive and we can pay attention to each aspect of the deity form of Krishna, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And first Kapila actually says you start at Krishna's lotus feet and you work your way up to the calves, to the thighs, and all these have actually representations. So for example, the thighs, they represent power, that the Lord will take care of his devotees. As he says, Pritra Naya Sadhunam Vinashaya Chadushkritam. And then to meditate on the navel, and even the nipples and the chest of the Lord, the necks, the arms. And this, he was talking about the club and his mala that he's wearing, the pearl necklaces which are called mani, and Krishna's lotus face, his lotus eyes, his glance upon his devotees, his smile, his eyebrows, and his laughter. So in chapter 28, Lord Kapila is talking more about meditation on Lord Vishnu. But as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we're actually more keen to meditate on Krishna's original form as Shyam Sundar Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. And it's actually incredibly important to internalize these aspects of Krishna and hearing about these aspects. What does Krishna look like? What does he do? What are his activities? Because this increases our Sambandha Gyan. Of course, Sambandha Gyan also becomes deeper manifest in Prayojana Gyan once one actually gets a deeper understanding of what's going on in the spiritual world. But at least for sadhakas like myself, starting with hearing about these things and hearing about his form is extremely important. In the Harinam Chintamani, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur discusses the importance of cultivation of Sambandha Gyan. So Sambandha Gyan means, who am I and who is Krishna? And what is my relationship with Krishna? So that means we're understanding, okay, if I know who someone is, then I know what he looks like. I know what his qualities are. I know what his activities are. I know what he's wearing. So this process of bhakti yoga is actually becoming an intense and radical personalist. And so I thought I would read, because through this process of Sambandha Gyan, it increases our faith, our shraddha. And so the more increasing our shraddha is, the deeper our chanting becomes. Of course, we know the Yuga Dharma is Harinam Sankirtan, or chanting of the holy names of Krishna. And so this process, of course, everything can be revealed through the holy names. But through this cultivation of Sambandha Gyan, we're actually developing a deeper conception and understanding of why we're chanting. And as Krishna says, Yeyatam mam prapadyante tam stataiva bhajamyaham. So the mood that we're approaching Krishna, he reciprocates with us accordingly. So we have to develop a deeper understanding of who Krishna is in order for him to also reciprocate with us. So one thing came to mind, which is called the Madhurashtakam. I won't read the whole thing, but you can search it up online and you can read it. It's very beautiful. But I can read, like the first verse, and then I'll read something from the Śrimad Bhāgavatam. So we can hear more about the form of Krishna today, and then we'll dive deeper further on in the purport. Adharam madhuram vadanam madhuram, nayanam madhuram, hasitam madhuram, hridhayam madhuram, gamanam madhuram, madhuradipater akilam madhuram. His lips are sweet, his face is sweet, his eyes are sweet, his smile is sweet, his loving heart is sweet, his gait or walk is sweet. Everything is completely sweet about the Lord of sweetness. So this is very nice. Of course, when Prabhupada is telling us about Vrindavan and the moods of the residents of Vrindavan within Goloka Vrindavan, it's a lot of sweetness. So this whole Madhurashtakam talks about these things. But I wanted to also read, so you can read the rest of that in your own time. I wanted to read from the 10th canto in the 20th chapter, or 21st chapter. If you want, you can pull it up. If not, it's no problem. Where it's also called the Venugit, where the gopis are glorifying the song of Krishna's flute. And so I'm just going to read the verses here. Hang on just a sec. It's not loading on my computer. You can start from text 1. There's only 20 verses, so I'm just going to read all of them. Okay. Okay. Chapter 21 of the 10th canto. Shukadev Goswami said, "Thus the Vrindavan forest was filled with transparent autumnal waters and cooled by breezes perfumed with the fragrance of lotus flowers growing in the clear lakes. The infallible Lord, accompanied by his cows and cowherd boyfriends, entered that Vrindavan forest. The lakes, rivers, and hills of Vrindavan resounded with the sounds of maddened bees and flocks of birds moving about the flowering trees. In the company of the cowherd boys and Balaram, Madhupati, Sri Krishna, entered that forest, and while herding the cows, he began to vibrate his flute. When the young ladies in the cowherd village of Raja heard the song of Krishna's flute, which arouses the influence of Cupid, some of them privately began describing Krishna's qualities to their intimate friends. The cowherd girls began to speak about Krishna, but when they remembered his activities, O king, the power of Cupid disturbed their minds, and thus they could not speak. Wearing a peacock feather ornament, so this you can start thinking about and meditating and thinking about Krishna's form and what he's wearing, what he's doing. Wearing a peacock feather ornament upon his head, blue kanikata flowers on his ears, and a yellow garment as brilliant as gold, and the Vaijayanti garland, Lord Krishna exhibited his transcendental form as the greatest of dancers as he entered the forest of Vrindavan, beautifying it with the marks of his footprints. He filled the holes of his flute with the nectar of his lips, and the cowherd boys sang his glories. The Vaijayanti garland is a garland that is a specific garland that Krishna will wear where it has 5 different types of flowers. And it stretches down, at least down to his knees, even sometimes all the way down to his lotus feet. It's a nice thing to think about. O king, when the young ladies in Vraja heard the sound of Krishna's flute, which captivates the minds of all living beings, they all embraced one another and began describing it. The cowherd girl said, O friends, those eyes that see the beautiful faces of the sons of Maharaj Nanda are certainly fortunate. As these 2 sons enter the forest, surrounded by their friends, driving the cows before them, they hold their flutes to their mouths and glance lovingly upon the residents of Vrindavan. For those who have eyes, we think there is no greater object of vision. Dressed in a charming variety of garments, upon which their garlands rest, and decorating themselves with peacock feathers, lotuses, lilies, and new-grown mango sprouts, and clusters of flower buds, Krishna and Balaram shine forth magnificently among the assembly of cowherd boys. They look just like the best of dancers appearing on a dramatic stage, and sometimes they sing. My dear gopis, what auspicious activities must the flute have performed to enjoy the nectar of Krishna's lips, independently, and leave only a taste for us gopis, for whom that nectar is actually meant. The forefathers of this flute, the bamboo trees, shed tears of pleasure. His mother, the river on whose bank the bamboo was born, feels jubilation, and therefore her blooming lotus flowers are standing like hair on her body. O friend, Vrindavan is spreading the glory of the earth, having obtained the treasure of the lotus feet of Krishna, the son of Devaki. The peacocks dance madly when they hear Govinda's flute, and when other creatures see them from the hilltops, they all become stunned. So some of the acharyas comment on this verse also, that Vrindavan is so special because Krishna doesn't wear shoes in Vrindavan. So when he appears in his forms as Vishnu, or even in Dwarka, in his form in Dwarka, he actually will have shoes. But in Vrindavan, Krishna goes barefoot. Another nice thing to think about. I always like that. Blessed are all these foolish deer, because they have approached Maharaj Nanda's son, who is gorgeously dressed and is playing his flute. Indeed, both the doe and the bucks worship the Lord with looks of love and affection. Krishna's beauty and character create a festival for all women. Indeed, when the demigods' wives flying in the airplanes with their husbands caught sight of him and hear his resonant flute song, their hearts are shaken by Cupid, and they become so bewildered that the flowers fall out of their hair and their belts loosen. Using their upraised ears as vessels, the cows are drinking the nectar of the flute song flowing out of Krishna's mouth. The calves, their mouths full of milk from their mother's moist nipples, stand still as they take Govinda within themselves through their tear-filled eyes and embrace him with their heart within their hearts. O mother, in this forest all the birds have risen onto the beautiful branches of the tree to see Krishna. With closed eyes, they are simply listening in silence to the sweet vibrations of his flute, and they are not attracted by any other sound. Surely these birds are on the same level as great sages. When the rivers hear the flute song of Krishna, their minds begin to desire him, and thus the flow of their currents is broken, and their waters are agitated, moving about in whirlpools. Then with the arms of their waves in the rivers embrace Murari's lotus feet, and holding on to them present offerings of lotus flowers. In the company of Balaram and the cowherd boys, Lord Krishna is continuously vibrating his flute as he herds the animals of Raja, even under the full heat of the summer sun. Seeing this, the cloud in the sky has expanded himself out of love. He is rising high and constructing out of his own body, with its multitudes of flower-like droplets of water, an umbrella for the sake of his friend. The Aborigine women of the Vrindavan area become disturbed by lust when they see the grass marked with the reddish kumkum powder. Now, of course, this isn't mundane material lust. This lust is referring to pure spiritual love that they have for God. Endowed with the color of Krishna's lotus feet, this powder originally decorated the breasts of his beloveds, and when the Aborigine women smear it on their faces and breasts, they feel fully satisfied and give up all their anxiety. Of all the devotees, this Govardhan hill is the best. O my friends, this hill supplies Krishna and Balaram, along with their calves, cows, and cowherd friends, all kinds of necessities, water for drinking, very soft grass, caves, fruits, flowers, and vegetables. In this way, the hill offers respects to the Lord. Being touched by the lotus feet of Krishna and Balaram, Govardhan Hill appears very jubilant. My dear friends, as Krishna and Balaram pass through the forest with their cowherd friends, leading their cows, they carry ropes to bind the cows' rear legs at the time of milking. When Lord Krishna plays on his flute, the sweet music causes the moving living entities to become stunned and the non-moving trees to tremble with ecstasy. These things are certainly very wonderful. Thus narrating to one another the playful pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he wandered about in the Vrindavan forest, the gopis became fully absorbed in thoughts of him. So these types of things in Shastra you can read in so many different aspects of describing the beauty of the form of Krishna, of the form of his form of Vishnu. And these are incredibly important for us to meditate on, as Devahuti is doing, and she's receiving instructions from Lord Kapiladev. So we'll move on in the purport here. And the second paragraph, Prabhupada will explain further. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said, Brahmabhuta prasanatma. This means that unless one is freed from the material entanglement and situated in Brahman, there is no question of entering into the understanding of devotional service or engaging in Krishna consciousness. One who is engaged in devotional service to Krishna is understood to be already realized in the Brahman concept of life, because transcendental knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead includes knowledge of Brahman. So just like the example of watering the root of the tree. You water the root of the tree, everything is naturally nourished. So Krishna is the source of Brahman, as Prabhupada will say here, Brahmano hi pratishtaham. So if we know Krishna, we automatically become Brahman realized. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Brahmano hi pratishtaham. The concept of the personality of Godhead does not depend on Brahman. The Vishnu Purana also confirms that one who has taken shelter of the all-auspicious Supreme Lord is already situated in the understanding of Brahman. In other words, one who is a Vaishnava is already a Brahmana. Now, we know that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada has a 160-page dissertation that he presented to caste Brahmanas about the glories of the Vaishnavas. And this debate going on whether or not people who are not born in a Brahmin caste are actually coming to the Brahminical platform as devotees, as Vaishnavas. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada was giving initiations, Brahmin initiation, to people who were far born out of these castes. And I wanted to read just some of the citations that he makes. So here he cites a verse, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada, Bhaktis tvai sthiratara bhagavan yadi syad, daivena na falati dhivya kishora murti, mukti swayam muktili tanjali sevate sman, dhamarta kama gataya samaya pratiksha. Thank you. O my Lord, if one engages in your pure devotional service, free from karma, jnana, and sense gratification, with determination, you become visible in your original transcendental youthful form as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As far as liberation is concerned, she stands before the devotee with folded hands, waiting to render service. Religion, economic development, and sense gratification, which are difficult to achieve for non-devotees with material desires, are all automatically attained without separate endeavor. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada then comments on this. And he says that the smartas, or non-devotees, so smartas is also referring to the caste brahmanas. So for those of you who don't know, the caste brahmanas believe that only those who are born within the lineage of Brahminical caste are allowed to actually be preaching things like the Bhāgavatam and are considered to still be higher authorities than Vaishnavas. That's a basis of summary. So here Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada will refute that. The smartas, or non-devotees who are simply attached to rules and regulations, are content with the fruits of the four aims of life: religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Yet these four principles naturally and submissively remain under the feet of the Harijanas, or the devotees. The Harijanas are liberated persons, so they have no enthusiasm for conditioned life. When do the karmis give up their occupational duties and understand the glories of devotional service to the Lord? The Śrimad Bhāgavatam gives the following illustration. The Supreme Lord said, this is in the 11th canto, chapter 14, text 14, "The devotee who has offered his soul to me does not want anything if it is separate from me, not the position of the supreme demigod of the universe, Brahma, nor that of Lord Indra, nor kingship over the entire earth or over the lower planetary systems, nor the mystic performances of yoga, nor even freedom from the cycle of rebirth. These are constitutional symptoms of devotees. Shri Hari is the only goal and objective of the Harijanas. Others naturally become bewildered by the good birth and education of the Brahmanas or by the wealth, opulences, and success in the trade of the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas. The feelings and behavior of non-devotees are completely different to the feelings and behavior of the devotees. The former are influenced by contamination and lamentation, whereas the latter are full of ecstasy in the service of Hari." So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also says, "Naham Vripro Nacha Narapatir Nabivaisho Nasudro Naham Cha Nagripatir Novanosto Yatirva." This prayer that I'm not a Brahmana, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya, I'm not a Sudra, I'm not a sannyasi, I'm not a brahmachari, I'm not a grihasta, I'm not a vanaprastha, I'm simply a servant of the servant of the keeper of the cowherd damsels of Raja, Lord Krishna. And so we're hearing here that this is automatically bringing one to Brahmabhuta Prasanatma. So Prabhupada also then will further talk about the importance of observing prescribed rules and regulations. In the previous verses, the previous paragraphs, he's saying that until one is actually purified, he can't actually properly understand and come into the aspects of pure devotional service. So Prabhupada says here, another significant point of this verse is that one has to observe the prescribed rules and regulations. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Yukta Hara Viharasya, when one engages in devotional service and Krishna consciousness, he still has to eat, sleep, defend, and mate, because these are necessities of the body. But he performs such activities in a regulated way. He has to eat Krishna Prasad. He has to sleep according to regulative principles. The principle is to reduce the duration of sleep and to reduce eating, taking only what is needed to keep the body fit. In short, the goal is spiritual advancement, not sense gratification. Similarly, sex life must be reduced. Sex life is meant only for begetting Krishna-conscious children. Otherwise, there is no necessity for sex life. Nothing is prohibited, but everything is made yukta, regulated, with the higher purpose always in mind. By following all these rules and regulations of living, one becomes purified, and all misconceptions due to ignorance become nil. It is specifically mentioned here that the causes of material entanglement are completely vanquished. The Sanskrit statement, anartha nivritti, indicates that this body is unwanted. We are spirit soul, and there was never any need of this material body. But because we wanted to enjoy the material body, we have this body through the material energy under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As soon as we are reestablished in our original position of servitorship to the Supreme Lord, we begin to forget the necessities of the body, and at last, we forget the body. So we see devotees display this actually quite often, even within this body of performing service. Prabhupada talks about this. I'll read this part and then further elaborate. Sometimes in a dream, we get a particular type of body with which to work in the dream. I may dream that I am flying in the sky, or that I have gone into the forest or some unknown place. But as soon as I am awake, I forget all these bodies. So this ties back into what Prabhupada is saying about mamchayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. This fact that when one is engaging in devotional service, one is on the transcendental platform. And so we see when devotees are distributing books, or when devotees are doing service all day in the temples, sometimes they're not even thinking about their hunger, they're not thinking about their body, not thinking about anything else besides the service that they're engaging in. And so a lot of this process of spiritual life is actually this process of experiencing and feeling these things. So we can talk about it theoretically, but we have to actually apply these things and engage, and then we can experience this aspect of actually experiencing that we're not this body, of realizing it through the process of devotional service. Similarly, when one is Krishna conscious, fully devoted, He forgets all changes of body. We are always changing bodies, beginning at birth from the womb of our mother. But when we are awakened to Krishna consciousness, we forget all these bodies. The bodily necessities become secondary, for the primary necessity is the engagement of the soul in real spiritual life. The activities of devotional service in full Krishna consciousness are the cause of our being situated in transcendence. The words Bhagavatyatma Sangshaye denote the personality of Godhead as the supreme soul, or the soul of everyone. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Bijam mam sarvabhutanam, I am the seed of all entities. By taking shelter of the Supreme Being by the process of devotional service, one becomes fully situated in the concept of the personality of Godhead. As described by Kapila, Ma guna shrutir matrena, one who is fully Krishna conscious, situated in the personality of Godhead, is immediately saturated with love of God as soon as he hears about the transcendental qualities of the Lord. Devahuti was fully instructed by her son Kapiladev on how to concentrate her mind on the Vishnu form in full detail. Following the instructions of her son in the matter of devotional service, she contemplated the form of the Lord within herself with great devotional love. That is the perfection of Brahman realization, or the mystic yoga system or devotional service. At the ultimate issue, when one is fully absorbed in thought of the Supreme Lord and meditates on Him constantly, that is the highest perfection. Bhagavad Gita confirms that one who is also absorbed in such a way is considered to be the topmost yogi. Can anyone say that verse from the Bhagavad Gita? Margatena taratmana shadavan bhajateyo mam sama yuktatam omata. The real purpose of all processes of transcendental realization, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, or bhakti yoga, is to arrive at the point of devotional service. So here, Prabhupada, I kind of found in these purports, it reminded me of two verses in the Bhagavad Gita. Well, technically four, because there's two verses in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna repeats twice. Does anyone remember these two verses? Right? Which chapters are they in? Do you remember? Yeah. And then there's also the verses, anyone know the other verse that Krishna repeats twice? There's two of them. So Manmava Bhavamad Bhakto, most of us know this. Krishna says, always think of me, worship me, become my devotee. This is the golden rule of bhakti. Always think of Krishna and never forget him. But there's another verse that's stated twice. Does anyone know? Yeah, right. So Krishna talks about the importance of performing one's own duty. And here, Mother Devahuti is following the instructions that Lord Kapiladeva is giving her, while also constantly thinking of Krishna within her heart. Now for her, it kind of worked out nicely, because one of her main instructions was to constantly think about and meditate on the form of Krishna. For us, as Prabhupada Nugas, in this line of Gaudiya Vaishnav Sampradaya, we're also engaging in many different forms of services, book distribution, going out and performing Harinam Sankirtan, serving the deities, cooking, cleaning. We're engaged in so many activities. Even within our ashrams, we might receive certain instructions from our spiritual masters to engage in a certain process of devotional service. Maybe one's instructed to remain in the renounced order for the rest of his life. Maybe one is instructed to take into the Grihastha ashram. So this is an important aspect of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, that the externals are actually secondary. And I thought about these two verses in the Gita that are so important, that really blend together very nicely. Krishna is saying that it's actually better to perform your own prescribed duty, even if done imperfectly, than to try and perform another's duty, even if done perfectly. I remember this, I struggled a lot with this verse for a lot of time, because I didn't really understand what that meant. Like, if I was performing an external service perfectly, but even though it wasn't my duty, then what's the problem? The problem is we're receiving certain instructions to engage in a service in order to also develop an internal consciousness in what we're doing. So, yes, sweeping and cleaning the temple is wonderful. Serving the deity is wonderful. Distributing books, of course, is Prabhupada's main thing that he wants us to do. Going out and performing Harinam Sankirtan, preaching and cultivating and taking care of devotees. All these things are so important. But we cannot forget also the internal aspect of Krishna's instructions of Mad Mama Bhava Mad Bhakto, always thinking of Krishna. And so when we're going out and performing these services, it takes effort. We have to actively think of Krishna. I remember a devotee once told me one time, I was chanting and I was leading a kirtan and I was just totally not thinking of Krishna at all. My mind was very disturbed. My mind was going everywhere. There's so many people running around in the subways and, all these different types of people causing disturbances. He said, yes, you have to actively think of Krishna. So while we're performing these external forms of devotional service, we have to continuously endeavor to maintain a proper consciousness. I'll finish the purport here, but I found that very, very important. Performing your duties, but also maintaining that internal consciousness of what Prabhupada is giving us. What are we wanting to go to? Developing that internal greed to understand our relationship and love for Krishna and developing more love and compassion, and then sharing that and turning it to others who haven't understood Krishna yet. Following the instructions of her son in the matter of devotional service, she contemplated the form of the Lord within herself with great devotional love. That is the perfection of Brahman realization, or the mystic yoga system, or devotional service. At the ultimate issue, when one is fully absorbed in thought of the Supreme Lord and meditates on Him constantly, that is the highest perfection. Bhagavad Gita confirms that one who is always absorbed in such a way is considered to be the topmost yogi. Sorry, I just read that. The real purpose of all processes of transcendental realization, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, or Bhakti Yoga, is to arrive at the point of devotional service. If one endeavors simply to achieve knowledge of the absolute truth or the supersoul, but has no devotional service, he labors without gaining the real result. That's another important point. This is compared to beating the husks of wheat after the grains have already been removed. Unless one understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be the ultimate goal, it is valueless simply to speculate or perform mystic yogic practice. In the Ashtanga Yoga system, the seventh stage of perfection is dhyana. This dhyana is the third stage in devotional service. There are 9 stages of devotional service. The first is hearing, then comes chanting, and then contemplating. By executing devotional service, therefore, one automatically becomes an expert jnani and an expert yogi. In other words, jnana and yoga are different preliminary stages of devotional service. Devahuti was expert in accepting the real substance. She contemplated the form of Vishnu in detail as advised by her smiling son, Kapiladev. At the same time, she was thinking of Kapiladev, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore she completely perfected her austerities, penances, and transcendental realization. So the purport of this purport and verses is that we should be constantly engaging in service. Yes, externally this is very important. Also take care of the body, taking rest when we need to. Of course, health is also a very important priority in our devotional service. But whatever external services we're performing, as Prabhupada's saying here, it needs to actually have consciousness of Krishna, of serving Krishna. I mean, Prabhupada is extremely merciful, and we can do these and perform these external services and go through the motions with a reliance on Prabhupada giving us his mercy. But we should also be developing that's for me at least, that's not enough. I find myself very unqualified to continuously just rely on Prabhupada's mercy. Of course, we are reliant on Prabhupada's mercy, but we have to endeavor ourselves to be thinking of Krishna and develop an internal mood of what we're doing so that also we can get more taste and rasa in what we're doing. Prabhu was just telling me yesterday and going out, and he's doing such an amazing service, distributing these Arabic books to people, and he's saying there's just so much bliss doing it. Because while we're doing these services, Krishna's reciprocating with our consciousness, and he gives us that, as we say, Krishna magic, where we're going out and interacting with these people who, supposedly don't know Krishna or aren't aware of Krishna, but then all of a sudden something happens and they read something from the book and something immediately changes. So Krishna's always reciprocating with us in our consciousness. I've found that when I'm distributing books too, when I'm not in a good consciousness, sometimes I have a very bad day distributing books. And even when I have a bad consciousness, other times I have a great external day distributing books. But the satisfaction always tends to come when I'm thinking more of Krishna. So I'm sorry, there's only a couple minutes left, but thank you for sitting through the entire class. I'm very grateful that everyone here is much more learned about the Bhagavatam. I'm a very squabbling neophyte in one sense, so thank you for sitting it and tolerating the class. I feel very fortunate to serve the Bhagavatam. So if anyone has any corrections or comments or questions, we have a couple of minutes. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Anything else? Arjuna Prabhu? Microphone? I can repeat it.
Is it possible to experience transcendental bliss
While suffering the material pangs? Well, I guess the question also is, what level of transcendental bliss are you referring to? Because, I mean, to my understanding, we're all here for a reason. And although we're not completely purified of our anarthas and suffering the material miseries, we're still experiencing bliss in serving Krishna. So, yes, of course, we're here struggling with anarthas and different psychophysical idiosyncrasies that we all have. But we can still experience bliss of serving Krishna. That's why we're here. Otherwise, why would we be here? Now, to the level of transcendental bliss, I mean, that can differ. You know, for example, if as Krishna says, Mam chayo vyabhicharina bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So one's engaging in my service, he's beyond the modes of material nature. But if I'm not, then if I stop engaging in Krishna's service, then I also fall back down. We're tatashta shakti, we're jivas. So we have the capacity to either be absorbed in Krishna consciousness or also be absorbed in material consciousness. But it's not like it's a black and white thing. Because although, yes, we're suffering the pangs of material miseries, we're still experiencing bliss by serving Krishna. Someone asked Prabhupada, or Prabhupada asked devotees one time, you know, how do you know Krishna is real? And devotees were quoting the Bhāgavatam or quoting the Bhagavad Gita. And then someone finally said, Prabhupada, we can feel Krishna. You know, and Prabhupada said, yes, you can feel the bliss of serving Krishna. So just because we're suffering different aspects of material nature or karmic reactions or whatever it is, doesn't nullify the experiences that we're having. Although it might not be fully realized on the stage of bhava and prema, there's a reason we're still here. And it's because we're getting some taste for what we're doing. I'm not sure if that helps. You don't look satisfied. Maybe Sitaram Prabhu can make a comment to help further that. Okay, it's 9:01, so we can further the discussion afterwards. Grantaraj Śrimad Bhāgavatam ki jai. Prabhu, did you want to say one last thing? Kalila Prabhu?
Well, I can say, just from personal experience of distributing these Arabic books the last few days here in New York, we're not thinking of Krishna. I'm not meditating on the form of Krishna. I'm just thinking about Srila Prabhupada and begging him, Srila Prabhupada, you can work miracles. Do something. And one thing that happened yesterday is, you know, these are the confirmations. This is what's so inspiring and blissful in this book distribution when Bhakta Kevin was talking to this Muslim gentleman, trying to get him to take the book and give a donation. And the man, it seemed like he was interested in the book, but he was not going to give a donation. And then suddenly another man, this was actually in a smoke shop, they were smoking hookahs. Another man, a young man actually, pulled out some money and gave it to Bhakta Kevin for the man who was refusing to give money. And we found out he was a Pakistani. So I started talking to him in Urdu, I know.
Wow.
So then we ended up giving him a book too, an English book, because he didn't know Arabic. So, this is the bliss of, feeling Srila Prabhupada's presence, working miracles to get people the books, which we know, the books are Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada is going home with them. We don't know the details, what will happen. That is so ecstatic, just to see that again and again and again, every day this sort of miracle happens. Wow.
Beautiful. This is a good, actually, I actually meant to add this in, that me personally also, I'm not capable of thinking of Krishna all the time. So when we think of his devotees, and especially like Srila Prabhupada, and how magnanimous he is, I mean, that connects us with Krishna. And there's, as you're saying, the mercy is there. We just have to want to endeavor to help Srila Prabhupada in this mission. So thank you for your comment and all your wonderful services. Hare Krishna. Okay, Granth Srimad Bhāgavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.